Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. We've got plenty to discuss tonight, but consistently, if you've joined us before, you know that I have pointed out one of the reasons that Democrats have struggled to gain ground over Republicans in the polls is because they have not pitched something to Americans that they are selling this election. So far, it's just been Donald Trump is really, really, really bad. And there hasn't been anything else. Well, they have finally found their message. What from coast to coast they are arguing is their pitch for the midterms. They finally found it, and that is make the entire United States of America just like the state of California. Now, to those of you on the right side of the audience, those of you who are independents, those of you who may have moved away from California, you may have broken into raucous laughter. I'm not kidding, though. This is, in fact, the pitch that they're making. Democrat Representative Ted Lieu has come forward to announce Democrats are ushering in massive changes to the Supreme Court if Democrats are in power. Massive changes everywhere. We're going to make America the California model. Here's Ted Lieu.
This is a radical Supreme Court that is making decisions simply to benefit Republicans. It's going to usher in massive Supreme Court reform when Democrats take control. And that will be because of the actions of extreme political actor John Roberts in this partisan Supreme Court.
All right, so there you go. We have to make America just like California's 36th Representative Ted Lieu says. We got to change everything. We got to pack things differently because everything is terrible under John Roberts. He's the Trumpiest Trump actor that ever Trumped. Okay, I don't really recommend it. The other side of this, other than packing the courts, what are they going to do? They're going to pay for everything. Pay for everything all the time, all over the place. And we're not just talking about for things that you are told that you need to pay for, like basic health care for poor moms who are browbeaten under the system of a cruel American health industry. No. We're just paying for nonsense. Like Mayor Karen Bass of Los Angeles, up for re-election, she's arguing that what we need to do is give money to those who lost their teeth due to meth, the meth of us. They need to get taxpayer money for brand new teeth. Here you go.
How many people who are unhoused that you meet have no teeth at all? They don't have teeth. Why? Because meth rots your teeth. You can't succeed without teeth.
George Washington was not available for question. Anyway.
So there needs to be comprehensive health care provided to people.
So if someone gets addicted to meth and then loses their teeth, then I have to pay for them to make up for all of their bad decisions. Now, again, addiction is no joke. It's not suggesting that, you need to browbeat and keep people down who are who have made bad decisions, who want to then come back from those decisions. I hear you. I do. However, the issue that a lot of Americans have is when you ask them to pay to rectify those bad decisions. If you lose your teeth, that's not my job to replace those for you. That's a little bit weird. But the Los Angeles mayoral election is getting wild as it is because the guy whose entire election bid is it doesn't have to be a trash-infested, poop-infested heap here in Los Angeles. All of the Democrat establishment, all the way from the Pod Save America bros, the former Obama speechwriters, down to the two Democrat candidates, are going after Spencer Pratt because he's actually gaining some momentum. So she's very, very angry that in a couple of commercials that he's depicted her as like a Marvel movie villain or something and depicted Kamala Harris as Darth Vader. This is where all the focus is. Remember, during the 2024 elections, Gavin Newsom tried to pass a law banning AI campaign advertisements because they were unflattering. Here's the same thing. We have to ban anything about us that's unflattering because that's actually violence.
But what's worrying me now is that his social media is now taking on a violent turn.
Okay, so not a single word about the individuals openly calling for the murder of the President of the United States or the murder of Supreme Court justices or the violent revolution as called for by the primary leftist streamer Hassan Piker, or any of the open acts of violence and calls for political terrorism, but because Spencer Pratt, I guess, depicted you as, how is this depiction? Oh, he depicted you as the Joker, and Gavin Newsom is like, Louis the XIV, and then Kamala Harris as a drunk. Okay, that's a pretty accurate depiction. That's the violence? Because he depicted you as the Joker? Okay.
And that worries me, because when you do that and when your messages are so hateful, or when you demonize people, then you do provoke people who are unstable.
Oh, unstable. Now, the funny thing here is that you and I both know Los Angeles does in fact have quite a few unstable people. And I do appreciate that her biggest defense, you can say, yeah, she went off to Ghana right in the middle of that horrible Palisades and fire fiasco. Her office was denying permits to rebuild left and right. We're going to talk about that here in a couple of minutes. But don't you dare call her the Joker. Hey, you want to know how I got this office? Put a Democrat in that office. Like that's the problem? Really? That's the issue? And not just that, Nitya Raman, Ramalama Ding Dong's also very upset. She says that Spencer Pratt's actually, by making these videos, it's fascism. It's really bad. It's fascist, guys.
But I also think it's a very real thing that we should take seriously and we need to grapple with, and we need to offer it an honest response, a response that's rooted in actually solving these problems. Otherwise, people will turn to fascism, to mini Trump, which is who I think Spencer Pratt really represents.
Also, if he disagrees with you on paying for free teeth for those who lost theirs to meth, then he's a super duper ultra fascist. That's the claim. That's the call. And they're doing this coast to coast. If you disagree with him, again, if there's a really close election in Virginia in which is thrown out by the Supreme Court of the United States, the Supreme Court of Virginia, because it doesn't agree with the rules, or you have racial gerrymandering thrown out by the Supreme Court of the United States, then anyone who disagrees with the Democrats is instantly a racist and a Jim Crowist and all of the other ists and phobes. Yeah, I don't think that's what's going to bring home the bacon. But that's not the worst out of California today. The worst out of California today is a brand new, fresh out of the oven scandal in which Governor Gavin Newsom signed off on a $180 million project to buy free tablets, free Android tablets for those in prison. So the idea was that you would give these educational tablets, would give these over to the prisoners of California, and then they would rehabilitate and they'd learn to read, and it would be wonderful and heartwarming and way to go, Gavin. Yeah. Only, nope. That's not what the prisoners used them for. Prisoners got around the security features, which was essentially a sign saying, hey, please don't look at porn. And about 5 minutes later, they were doing two things, according to the City Journal article reporting on this. As part of this administration transformation and rehabilitation, a lot of Asians there, Newsom approved a $189 million contract to provide new digital tablets, generic flat screen devices in this plastic shell, to every inmate in the state prison system at no cost to the offenders. And the administration heralded the effort to replace inmates' old tablets, which were piloted in 2018, given to nearly all prisoners by 2023 as a step towards, and I'm not joking, folks, it's called, quote, digital equity. Dude, digital equity? Really? For justice-impacted individuals who could, in theory, use the devices to contact their families, consume educational content, and learn new technology. In reality, the taxpayer-funded tablets have been used for two things: looking at porn and having explicit sexual conversations, some of them with minors. I know it's surprising to you that giving an internet-accessed device to those in prison who might be in prison for perhaps sexual offenses, then used those tablets, those taxpayer-funded tablets, to commit, sexually deviant acts up to and including talking to minors. It's just disturbing. The City Journal article goes through some of the examples of those criminals which have been given those particular tablets. Radio crew, we got to send you over to the commercial side, and a lot of stuff to cover on the other side of it. We're going to continue on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. All right, going to continue on some of this, again, very, very bizarre but not really surprising fraud coming out of California, and just really weird programs. California's government and Gavin Newsom's wife is receiving a lot of criticism over a free diapers program. You say, what's wrong with, giving some free diapers to moms? A couple of things. First of all, it was a $20 million deal that was given to the nonprofit that Gavin Newsom's wife just happens to run. Oh, gee, wow. But hey, if they're just buying the diapers and then immediately providing them and no one's really making any money on it, well, then I'm sure it's really above board, right? If it's just a rote payment, maybe, again, yeah, conservatives, libertarians, you don't like government-funded projects and things that are just giving out stuff. But, diaper programs in hospitals, what could be the issue there? Well, according to our own Drew Allen over at the Daily Signal, the diapers that are being provided are 50 cents more per diaper than just buying diapers in general. And you may say, Tony, why is this? Yeah, that's a very good question. It's a very good question. Why are you not just buying the diapers and then giving them to the moms if you really want to do something like this? Why are we making these expensive, extra charge diapers? Is it maybe so we can give some individuals some employment and maybe some money on the side? The Golden State Start program, rolling out this summer at 65 to 75 hospitals, is mostly serving Medi-Cal families. New parents receive a shiny box of state-branded diapers, courtesy of the Gavin Newsom wife-connected nonprofit, Baby to Baby. Excellent. Yeah, and again, they're very, very overpriced. Again, you're not surprised. At a time when they could simply purchase the diapers and forgive the tax, like forgiving the sales tax and things, and just buy them and give them directly to mothers. Instead, we have to have a serious upcharge on them that we don't know where the money is going to. So, yet another in the list of really bizarre fraud situations, another California Democrat controversy, this one in the sexual scandal category. Fiona Ma, the current California state treasurer and the current candidate, or one of the current candidates, for California's lieutenant governor, has just been accused by a former female employee of crawling into the same bed and exposing herself multiple times while sharing a room, according to the Daily Mail. Fiona Ma, the current California state treasurer and candidate for CA's lieutenant gov, was accused by a former female staffer of crawling into her bed over a series of incidents. So this wasn't just one incident or one evening, although, again, not great, Bob, and essentially stripping down to the nude, and according to this particular employee, making sexual advances. Now, Ma immediately came out and claimed that the incidents weren't sexual in nature and do not constitute sexual harassment. I'm sorry, hang on. If you're in a double bed hotel room with a colleague and you strip down to the nude and climb into bed with him, what is that? What is like a European greeting? A Democrat staffer bonding session? What are we talking about here? A little strange, a little weird, a little bizarre. Now, the documents reportedly show, according to the Daily Mail, that she used taxpayer dollars to help settle a sexual harassment lawsuit with the former employee for $350,000. I'll remind you all, regarding frauds and payments, we still have not gotten to the very bottom of Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota's, her husband, definitely not brother's, California winery that doesn't exist. As you recall, a couple of months ago, people were asking questions about Ilhan Omar's $30 million net worth that was then revised to $18,000. Now, that $30 million was estimated to be part of her husband's winery because, nothing says alcohol is haram like having a winery. But anywho, that's also vanished into thin air, and some of the promised documents showing the initial registration have since been altered and put forward for a request for redaction. We got to bring the radio crew back from commercial. Tons more to talk about tonight. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
The Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. It doesn't get any better for the Californian model for the election side, and that's because the Trump administration, at least via an announcement from Vice President J.D. Vance, has deferred $1.3 billion in Medicaid reimbursements because again, one would assume that if you have a state that is riddled with fraud, and we haven't even talked about in the first segment the hospice fraud, the situations regarding California's numerous infrastructure and Medi-Cal property tax fraud, all different kinds of frauds. And they won't shut off the faucet. They won't say, hey, maybe we shouldn't be funding these because they're so riddled with issues. So here was the vice president today making an announcement that some of these payments are going to be deferred.
We're announcing that the federal government is deferring $1.3 billion in Medicaid reimbursements from the state of California. And the simple reason is because the state of California has not taken fraud very seriously, and because of that, we see a lot of the consequences that I just referenced. And again, let me highlight the fact that this really is two separate victims. So there are California taxpayers and American taxpayers who are being defrauded because California isn't taking its program seriously. But also you have people who've been prescribed medications that they don't even need. Sometimes they've had drugs put into their bodies that they don't need because fraudsters have actually encouraged false prescriptions and false administration of medications. So think about this. You're just a person trying to go see a doctor. You assume that your doctor is doing the right thing, but these fraudulent healthcare providers are getting rich by giving people medications they don't even need. It's a defrauding of the American taxpayer, but it's a violation of the trust that should exist between every American and the people who prescribe the medications. That's
not a bad way to move. Not a bad way to move from the vice president, again, actually trying to bring forward a couple of resolutions to these. Well, the other kind of resolution, what Democrats are trying very hard to kind of bash their heads against, would be the redistricting efforts by the Republicans by several states. As a reminder, it was Governor Kathy Hochul of New York who in 22 and 23 began an out-of-schedule redistricting procedure. Again, trying to do a little gerrymandering, which then moved forward over to Texas in the last couple of years, and then to several other states, some in and some out. Well, after the Supreme Court of the United States ruled that you can't racially gerrymander districts, there was an expectation there were going to be a lot of the states in the South which had racially gerrymandered districts to rewrite their maps, and some of them have. Of course, we've talked about this, whether it's Alabama, whether it's Tennessee. The South Carolina Senate has pumped the brakes on this because of a couple of Republicans in the Senate, and that brings us over to Mississippi. So Governor Tate Reeves had come forward with an announcement that he was going to cancel Mississippi's special session that was set to begin next Wednesday after a federal appeals court vacated an order requiring the state to draw its Supreme Court map. So he came forward and it sounded kind of like he was trying to have his cake and eat it too and say, well, you know, unless the Supreme Court is forcing us and I can say, well, we had to, then I'm going to cancel the special session. And this promptly got him roasted over a roaring fire like chestnuts in the wintertime. And so about an hour later, he sprinted for, I've never seen a man rush to social media so fast. It was like after DiGiorno accidentally made a joke about domestic abuse in the early teens and then spent the day apologizing to every single person on Twitter. That's what Governor Tate Reeves decided to do here. So he came out, was like, just to clarify, you can feel the sweating through this tweet because this man does not want another Indiana in his Mississippi. He says, just to clarify, I said that I expect lawmakers to redraw congressional lines between now and the 2027 elections. And he has between now in all caps. So he's still trying to do the pilot, washing his hands of it and going, I'm not saying do it or not. He says, I expect them to redraw legislative and SCOTUS lines, or I should say, Supreme Court lines between now and the 2027 elections. He came out with like 3 more tweets saying that he's totally not against this. The age of Republicans worrying that there are going to be people who call them mean and stinky because they do Republican things is genuinely coming to an end. And it's a very good thing, by the way, as well, because a lot of people who want to elect Republicans want those Republicans to spend time in office doing Republican things. That will bring us over to Thomas Massie, but not quite. On the redistricting news, Georgia Governor Brian Kemp has now called a special session for June 17th. So I will absolutely be covering that with a little birthday party hat on to redraw the state's congressional and legislative maps and address issues with the voting system, Well, Fulton County has entered the chat kind of a situation. Georgia making moves here is a very, 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 very bad piece of news for Democrats. Georgia was supposed to be the state that was bluing. It was going to the left. The special elections promised it. Nope, what we're seeing are low propensity situations heading into this midterm season. And so the redistricting is punching above the weight that Republicans were expecting to get out of it. Again, to Governor Kathy Hochul and governors like J.B. Pritzker, Gavin Newsom of California, play stupid games, redistrict to stupid prizes. So that brings us over to the guy who's the most mad about this of all, Hakeem Jeffries. Hakeem Jeffries, who is, I don't think is expecting at this point to be made the Speaker of the House. He's just doing his best to hang on for dear life. The love child of William Shatner and Barack Obama has just started falling apart in press conferences. It's not enough for him to be heckled by children on Bring Your Kid to Work Day. Now he is just losing it over just being asked, hey, you went all in. You said we're going to do whatever it takes on this redistricting effort in Virginia, and then you lost. Now, I'm sorry, the audio here is a little bit rough because people weren't expecting to have to record the reporter who's asking the questions. But anyway, here's this exchange. It's a really wild one.
But Mr. Leader, you ultimately lost this, and you take personal.
Who lost?
You lost in the.
Who lost? Did the voters lose?
Well, Democrats did. You're lost.
Did the voters lose?
You take personal responsibility for.
So, for those who the audio was really low to hear there, the guy asks, hey, you just lost this despite. He's like, who lost? Who lost? Dude, you put all of your weight into. And he's like, did the voters lose? Well, which voters? There's this weird narrative that's going around the left is trying to trot out that there were 3 million people in Virginia who voted to redistrict. No. It was just over half of that 3 million who voted. It was a very, very close election. And some of the polling after that election has found that a lot of people would have come out to vote. Essentially, people holding voters' regret saying, I wish I would have come out and voted against it. It's not popular in Virginia. It barely passed. And then it was found to be unconstitutional. Saying the voters lost. I'm sorry, but just because the voters really want something doesn't mean it's magically correct. Just because the majority of the country wants something doesn't mean it's fine. You can't use that logic. Remember the first 150 years of the country that Democrats always bring up when the majority voted for some things that weren't so great?
Investing so much time and resources, tens of millions of dollars, in ultimately fruitless effort.
We did the right thing, and this effort is not over.
Okay, so an interesting maneuver from Hakeem. He also warns that because they're eliminating racially gerrymandered districts, then Democrat states are going to gerrymander again. You think he's shenan once, well, he'll shenan again. He's making the case that they're going to gerrymander even harder. Oregon and Washington and Massachusetts and Connecticut and New York and Illinois and California. We've kind of popped this balloon before, but we'll let him try it. We'll just give him the old college try here.
In advance of 2028, where we will have additional states that will come online, including but not limited to New York, New Jersey, Colorado, Washington, Oregon, Illinois, and Maryland. That's at least 7 states where we will be able to unleash a decisive and forceful response to what they are doing in the Deep South. And I'm telling you right now, we will. As several of those governors have already publicly indicated, and as the Senate president in New Jersey just said earlier today.
Yeah, that's a real struggle session there, my dude. Radio crew will catch you guys on the other side of the commercial. Say hey to the Senate president of New Jersey while we're gone, since apparently he's so rootin' tootin' important. It's the Tony Kinnett cast. We'll continue on the live stream. So were you impressed? Were you impressed by it? All of these Democrat governors who are going to the state of Illinois is being sued. California legislators have already pointed out that it's going to be very difficult for them to get any more juice out of that squeeze. Other states are already essentially to max capacity. I'm not really quite sure where it is they think they're going with this. And there's not really an answer for them, but bless their poor, sweet, adorable hearts. Now, on the committees, there's two other things in Congress today that are really notable. One is that there was a big committee fistfight. So there was a big committee fistfight over the Council on American-Islamic Relations. And we actually have our Capitol Hill correspondent, Pedro Gonzalez, giving us some of the details on that a little bit later. But first, I have to talk about this scandal with Representative Thomas Massie of Kentucky. Now, he is in a primary. According to some of the betting markets, he is now no longer considered the favorite to win the election. And these sexual assault allegations, I was asked about yesterday by you over in the Mail Time chat. Again, to ask a Mail Time question, head down to the Discord link. It's in the description. Join us over there, and you can ask as many Mail Time questions as your little heart desires. I told you I didn't know because I hadn't seen enough yet to make a decision. Now, I've pretty much made a decision at this point. I've seen some of the evidence. I've read through the details. I'm citing an article from the Free Beacon, the Washington Free Beacon. They usually do pretty excellent reporting. So the allegations are that an allegation of personal misconduct, sexual pressure, retaliation in a congressional job, and then an attempted hush money payment. So these come from a young lady by the name of Cynthia West. She is currently a Republican school board candidate in Florida and was briefly a congressional staffer for Congresswoman Victoria Spartz of Indiana. Now, we're going to get into a lot of things here in this, but I want to make these things explicitly clear. Because I am mentioning Thomas Massie on the show, on the air here, at this point in time, before an election, either of the candidates in that primary are more than welcome to come on the show and discuss whatever it is that they like, but under free time use, because I'm mentioning him in a political fashion and the impact this could have on the primary, we're playing by the rules because we're fair. Number two, this absolutely has nothing to do with Cynthia West's Republican school board candidate race, but if any of them are upset about that and also want to come on the show, we'll work something out because we play fair here on TKC. So, what's this whole scandal about? It's essentially that Cynthia West alleges that Thomas Massie pressured her to be very romantic and very intense. And then there was some pressure and some fights and things didn't turn out so well. And the allegation is that she was then forced out of her job and then forced to sign some kind of an NDA because things didn't end with Thomas Massie very well. So here's the timeline. So according to the Washington Free Beacon article, Massie's wife of 30 plus years, Rhonda, passed away in June of 2024. West claims that Massie first messaged her romantically on X in mid-August of 2024. So this wasn't during his marriage to his late wife. They began a, quote, intense, very romantic, end quote, relationship involving visits to his Kentucky home and at least one joint trip. Now, some of the assistance and pressure allegations, these are really thin. I'm going to be clear with you, these are very thin, but I'll read them here. According to the Free Beacon article and the accusation by West, Massie allegedly helped her secure a temporary 90-day probationary position in the office of his close ally, Representative Victoria Spartz of Indiana, as Director of Operations and Scheduling. She started around January of 2025 and was paid about $17,000 over roughly 12 weeks. After about 6 weeks, Ms. West says she ended the relationship because Massie repeatedly pressured her to engage in behavior, described in some reports as deviant sexual behavior. So the claim is that Thomas Massie of Kentucky, and welcome to our radio crew back from commercial here. We're kind of too deep in the weeds to pop in and out for a bumper there. The allegation is that Thomas Massie got her a nice job, and then after the relationship ended, things turned sour, and then there was a firing and a complaint. And it says that, and again, this is listed in the same report, Representative Victoria Spartz's office cited, quote, unsatisfactory job performance for not extending her employment. West filed a complaint with the Office of Congressional Workplace Rights, alleging retaliatory discharge and named Massie as a witness. Now we get to the hush money claims. So when she informed Massie, again, this is according to the Free Beacon, that she was filing the complaint, he allegedly offered her $5,000 in cash to walk away. She says this was part of the $10,000 in cash he'd previously given her for incidentals as a single mother, but she later returned the remainder during an in-person meeting at a Kentucky Cracker Barrel. And just to be clear here, there ain't nothing ever wrong with going to a Cracker Barrel to either do business or pleasure. That's just listed in the article. She also says she was offered a $60,000 settlement with the OCWR that required a non-disclosure agreement, an NDA, which she rejected on transparency grounds. So West has provided a sworn videotaped interview and deposition detailing these claims. And then she also cited emotional abuse. Okay. Couple of things here right off the top of the bat for transparency's sake. I used to like some aspects of Thomas Massie. Ever since he became kind of a drama queen in the House, I haven't really cared for him. I don't like those who just vote against the party or who vote against bills that Americans support because they're really mean and grumpy and mad. I also do not care for his whole Ro Khanna escapades and nonsense either. And we'll get to that. I'm not seeing things right here that convince me of a lot of really unethical behavior. I'm just not seeing it. And here's why. First of all, regarding Victoria Spart's office, it is widely known that working for her office, that's one of the wilder ones in Washington. Victoria Spart's is always one white monster away from flooring it to 90 on any road. That's a metaphor. That's not saying she actually drinks white monsters and floors it to 90, although she probably should. It's a crazy work environment with a high turnover rate. It is. And as far as also calling Thomas Massie and Victoria Spart's allies, it's kind of a stretch. Now, did Massie perhaps engage in getting her a kind of position because they're buds? Yeah, that happens in politics all the ding dang dong time. All the time. Absolutely. Have I suggested that people get think tank positions or been a reference for those that are professionally formed before? Absolutely. And you have likely done the same in other places. People you like, you suggest for positions. Now, obviously, with it being Congress, that's a little something different, but it's not like giving her a role to go be Victoria Spart's staffer is like some kind of a vacation, especially not for, Director of Operations and Scheduling. Oh, yeehaw. So essentially being the lady in charge of Victoria Spart's calendar. Yeesh. I mean, again, I've met Victoria several times. She's intense. She's a Ukrainian immigrant, and do I agree with her on a lot of stuff? Nah. Do I agree with her on some stuff? Yeah. Do I think she's kind of a drama queen as well? Yeah, after she threw a little bit of a grump fest and said, hey, I'm not going to serve in any committees because she was mad. Yeah, I criticized her for that. Do I see anything really connected here? I don't think so. Now, could I be wrong? Absolutely. This is just, I read the Free Beacon article. I've looked at the clip that Thomas Massie is really aggravated about over from Will Chamberlain, who made this.
You have an offer of what?
Settlement for $60,000 to settle the case for the retaliatory discharge in the Congressional Accountability Act violation with the Office of Victoria Spartz.
This video, you can see Will Chamberlain, by the way, transparency, also a friend. In the bottom right, he's watching and doing a little reaction video to the deposition video and the sworn testimony video. That's what he's reacting to. So he gets near to the end of the video and he makes these comments.
I can't do that.
So again, this is a key point. She's saying that to the extent an NDA was required, it was required for her settling with the Spartz's office. So then again, go back to Thomas Massie's tweet, his non-denial denial. He says, quote, I've never offered anybody money in exchange for their silence. So he hasn't offered an NDA. Technically true, but Ms. Spartz's office did offer her $60,000 in exchange for an NDA that would have prevented her from talking about Thomas Massie. So again, he's saying he's telling the truth, but it's not a denial of the substance of Ms. West's allegations.
So that's the video released by Will Chamberlain. Again, why do I point all of this stuff out? There are a couple of reasons. So Thomas Massie really did not like this particular video and allegations. And he came out pretty immediately. And he said, hey, I hope you have, what did he say here? I hope you have good lawyers when this is over. Why do you still assert that the NDA allegedly offered by Spartz's office or House Employment Office? I mean, I'm going to be quite frank with you. Probably more likely here that it is Spartz's office who offered it. I'm just saying, from how I'm reading it, Spartz has been Spartz has been accused of being a bad boss. There was an entire radio ad that I hated more than anything in the last election that someone's like sitting waiting for an interview with Victoria Spartz, their congresswoman, and there's like a person yelling in the background that sounds like Katie Porter. And is like, oh man, I would never want a congresswoman who yells, and then that's the commercial. Spartz has been hit with those allegations before. Again, she's an intense woman from Eastern Europe. Is that an excuse for that? No, this is not even a secret in Indiana at all. And I say that knowing that, like, I regularly text members of her freaking staff. So it's not like I'm surprising any of them. I mean, I'm probably surprising a few of them with how candid I'm being, but hey, this is the Tony Kinnett cast. So at least in this case, I don't think that, saying, well, I don't know who offered the NDA. Come on, guys. Come on, don't do this. But then he says this, perhaps you should clarify if you're making that part up. What would have prevented her from talking about me? So there was a little back and forth, newer articles, gave her the money in December, even started, it's a hatchet job and you're complicit. So you have Massie here saying, I don't like all of this negative press right before a primary, in the middle of a time when I'm trying to do stuff that alleges that I'm a really skeezy, sleazy guy without any evidence for it. Now, two things can and appear, based on my reading here with you, a little family-friendly, reading rainbow through these allegations. There's two things here that are popping out. Thing number one, it appears to be a very weak allegation. It does. Guys, people do, in fact, Massie did not message her while he was still married, while his wife was still alive. If they had kind of a hot and fast fling, that often happens with those who have recently lost their spouse. It is. That's a thing. I don't know if you want me to tell. I mean, there are a lot of people who who get married again, who get in a relationship again, and the desire for emotional intimacy is so strong, so fast that things do ramp up. I hear you. I do not know about the motives of Miss West. I'm not going to accuse her of anything. I'm just saying right now, suggesting that Massie offered her $5,000 in cash to walk away, and then this was also part of a $60,000 settlement. That required like a big NDA that may have included Massie, may have not. I'm not seeing it here. And I'm not trying to cover for anyone here specifically. I've just disclosed my entire relationship to any of the individuals in this entire situation. So that's thing number one. It looks like a bit of an oppo job right before an election. It does. And I say that, and I don't think the Free Beacon is the first article writing about this. The Free Beacon, I think, is just the most concise about all of the ifs, ands, buts, and coconuts on this particular story. Here's the second thing that's true. It is a little rich for Thomas Massie to be complaining about others making sexual assault allegations about him without any evidence. Thomas Massie has spent several months accusing innocent individuals by doxing them of being in the Epstein files and therefore super complicit, even though included in those Epstein files are like crackheads calling in and going, Hillary Clinton invented AIDS and then flew Epstein over to the University of roly-poly-oly, that kind of crap. Thomas Massie alleged that, hey, there are these 6 prominent individuals who weren't named, and so he stood up with Ro Khanna, and it was so brave and amazing. And then they ended up doxing guys that were part of an FBI, like a lineup to identify people who looked like the 2 individuals who were under suspicion. And those people in the lineup ended up getting a lot of death threats and things. So as for just an entire career of just voting no that is boiled down to in this last year, and accusing a lot of individuals by secondhand and proxy of sexual assault and sexual complicity, it's rather rich that when the shoe is on the other foot here, immediately it's, well, I'm going to give you shall hear from my lawyer, sir. Come on now, honey, sweetie baby. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. Sorry. Those things are said. Does it look like, do I think this is really overblown towards Massie so far? Yeah. Do I wish this was happening to him? No, I don't like that kind of crap. And I think it's obviously an oppo hit job before an election. That's just my take on it. Now, again, one more time. Do I think it's kind of rich that he's really upset about this? Oh, absolutely. So those things aside, Radio Crew, we're going to send you to the commercial break. We're going to head over to the live stream side and talk about some other news of the day. It's the Tony Kinnett cast here on the Daily Signal. So, those things aside, I'm going to take a dangerous idea here that I would, that I will look over at the comments. From Angel, Massie's interview on Tucker. You would think he would jump in front of a train for his wife. He loved her so much. He moved on very fast after her death. So I will say this. Massie, I had previously communicated with Massie very little, and from my Ministry of Truth account, for transparency's sake. Yeah, he did love his wife, absolutely. He did. And Miss West even acknowledges he didn't like reach out to her until after his wife had passed away. And again, it is a known thing in a lot of long-lasting, very passionate and faithful marriages that people do find another relationship or a spouse pretty quickly after. So that little bit tempered there. I understand, I hear where you're coming from, but that is, kind of that kind of thing. So that side, NDA equals a huge red flag. NDAs are ridiculously common in this business. Now, first of all, NDAs are often paper thin after 2 years. We say, Tony, how do you know that? Because I have disclosed things that I have signed. I don't think I've ever signed 1 or 2 NDAs. NDAs really don't hold water after 2 years in like any court ever. But also, it makes sense that Victoria Spart's office, again, who is known for being a little rowdy and shouty with the staffers, would offer an NDA. Does that fit Victoria Spart's character to me? Yeah, I mean, again, she's had it used as a sledgehammer against her in prior political races. So that's my take there. That's why it's not as much of a red flag for me. Just, again, trying to be transparent with y'all in how this particular goes. And as far as, going on Tucker for interviews, I mean, my show was mentioned on the Tucker Carlson network once before he went into full cuckoo land territory. So even though, Massie talked about Israel and loopy land, the moon is made out of lemons kind of stuff. Yeah. So those things aside, now I want to get into a little bit of something to make you care. And by that, I mean the Council on Islamic Relations. Nothing like a good old-fashioned fist fight over the Islamic terror threat here in the United States. And this comes in a couple of ways and means and shapes and flavors. So first and foremost, the Council on American-Islamic Relations is a group that is a nonprofit who claims to be kind of representative for those who are here in the United States and who are Muslim. They have a lot of ties to very concerning groups. And so Representative Chip Roy of Texas and several others called CAIR before Congress to testify about their advocacy for Islamic extremism in the United States under Sharia law. Now, this should already be a true red flag for a lot of you, because for a lot of Democrats here in the United States, they will never say, we don't like Sharia law, but this is clearly an attack on Muslims. They will ignore that Republicans have mentioned Sharia law, and they will start babbling on and on and on about how Muslims are so downtrodden and it's so terrible and mean and wicked and, oh, it's horrible, all that kind of thing. So again, rather bizarre, just stellarly strange stuff for sure. And it got a little bit spicy really quickly. It did. Not just from Representative Jamie Raskin, but all of the crying and the weeping and the tears came out to play. We're going to bring the radio crew back in, and then we're going to dive into this. Lots more news tonight. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
The Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIPC.
All right, it's time for a good old-fashioned fist fight with some committees. So you get C-SPAN in there, C-SPAN 2, C-SPAN 3, C-SPAN 8, the Ocho, and you get a little bit of crying and weeping and the gnashing of teeth. So first and foremost, I do want to share with you a couple of the things that CAIR as an organization has been posting over the last couple of weeks. So they are calling for Pramila Jayapal to perhaps be president of Rashida Tlaib to perhaps be the president of the United States.
It seems that Congress doesn't move until we make them move. They don't wake up one day and say, I think this is a genocide and we shouldn't be funding it or sending more bombs or enabling it to continue.
Do you think there is room for the movement for a just foreign policy to engage?
A just foreign policy. Yes. The allow all of the Christians and Jews to be killed. So say that Christians are being big crybabies about being slaughtered in Nigeria. Pretend and make up fake stories for the New York Times that even the New York Times is running cover for, that the Israelis are training dogs to rape Palestinians. Not joking. Actually, in the New York Times, some bizarre claims and stuff. The sequel to Air Bud getting really wild. But anywho, so that's the just foreign policy here. We'll get back to their little interview with Rashida Tlaib.
With conservatives,
this is anti-genocide Americans who do not want to fund the government of Israel.
Again, I love the graphic there. The AI image that's got like a Patriot battery with some decals and then an Israel flag on it. By the way, the Patriot missile battery systems are defensive, boys and girls. They are defensive. We have better missile strike launch systems for delivering offensive love taps. But I mean, asking CAIR to have an IQ higher than 5 is, quite a big ask for them.
Government of Israel anymore to commit these atrocities. They do not want to fund endless wars.
There is a significant chance that the Democrats may retake the House this fall, maybe the Senate as well. What should the party's top congressional priorities be from your perspective?
We need to address the fact that we have starvation wages in our country, that corporate greed is out of control.
Starvation wage, that's why everyone's starving, right? Oh, there aren't any cases of okay, that kind of crap. So they're going all in on that particular realm of things. Interesting, certainly a move. Here was the complaint about bringing CAIR, again, an Islamic organization, before the country for all of this, stuff today.
Thank you. This is the second time this year that this subcommittee has been convened to hold a hearing about Sharia law, which unsurprisingly doesn't even rank on the list of top 10 issues keeping Americans up at night. Actually, it doesn't appear to be an issue anywhere in this country except in Texas, where Republican politicians are so desperate to distract voters from their disastrous economy and surging gas prices. Because as one Republican strategist said, these candidates don't want to be talking about the economy right now. So they've made up a conspiracy theory about their Muslim neighbors in order to scare and motivate voters. But repeating lies over and over and over again doesn't make them true, and it doesn't make unconstitutional bigotry legal.
Ah, yes. This is all just such a terrible, horrible, evil attack on Muslims. Interesting. By the way, she's complaining that the Health and Human Services Committee addressed this particular issue. I don't know how to tell you guys this. In fact, I really do enjoy sharing this kind of thing. These kinds of hearings would fit under Health and Human Services. If you're passing laws and you're advocating for laws that involve human services, the HHS committee would in fact carry that out. That's how it works. You don't hold budget hearings in HHS. So despite, typical Botox blonde lady number 513 from the left trying that particular maneuver, no, I don't think so. Now, there was a lot that went on in this hearing today, and it got more than a little spicy. We go over to Pedro Rodriguez, our correspondent on Capitol Hill. Pedro, I know there was a lot of crazy stuff going on today regarding this CAIR hearing. Tell us about it.
Thank you for having me on, Tony. This morning kind of tells you everything that you need to know about the CAIR and Sharia law probing. So the House Subcommittee on the Constitution held a hearing today to examine how the nonprofits, right, the civil rights nonprofit group CAIR and the Muslim Brotherhood and the other ones that call themselves nonprofits are actually pushing Sharia law. And this hearing, which included testimony from a high school student who talked about Sharia law pamphlets being handed out in his high school, Bibles being forbidden from the library, but the Quran is allowed, right? And this is in deep red Texas, believe it or not. Some of the other advocates that were testifying before the committee are policy experts and people who have witnessed Sharia law worldwide firsthand. And what did we get out of this? All of the Democrats on the committee called this a hoax and quote unquote conspiracy theory being pushed by unconstitutional bigotry. So they refuse to acknowledge the fact that Sharia law, and most importantly, radical Islamic terrorism is making waves here in the United States. The committee hearing got pretty fiery in between Chip Roy, who obviously did not hesitate to fight back against these remarks. And for example, Congressman Wesley Hunt, he was an outspoken advocate about his experience living under Sharia law countries such as Iran and Iraq, and how he does not want this here in the United States.
So one of the things that I saw from this particular committee hearing, I saw, of course, over the last couple of weeks, we've all been witness to the situation in Dearborn, Michigan, the individuals who are connected with Islamic terror networks that have been given quite a friendly welcome over in Michigan. Of course, we've seen this in Texas, as well as the Islamic riots and protests up in New York outside of people's homes, like just punching Jewish girls as they walk by, as a lot of these rallies have seen. I didn't see a lot of questions regarding those incidents in the committee hearing today. Instead, I saw Jamie Raskin going after a high school student. Tell us a little bit more about some of the questions that were asked.
Yeah, so some of the questions that were asked were point blank. Do you acknowledge the radical Islamic threat here in the United States? Do you acknowledge that these quote unquote peaceful protests are not really as peaceful as they seem? And the response that we get from the Democrats on the committee is, one, they refuse to actually answer the question. And two, and I'm putting this in their words, these were their exact words, were that this is actually demonizing and vilifying an entire community, which is the Islamic community. Some Republican lawmakers reacted to that, saying there's a lot of Muslims here in the United States who reject the notion of Sharia law, and that this should be a bipartisan issue. But for some reason, they don't want it. The Democrats do not want to go on record and say exactly what they believe. After the committee hearing, I talked to Raskin himself.
You actually got a couple of minutes with Raskin after the hearing? Wow.
I did. His staffers tried to pull him away from me, but Raskin was interested in what I had to say. And I've confronted him several times, and it was just a matter of time until he actually gave me a straight answer. And, you know, he condemned radical Islamic terrorism, and so did Democrat Steve Cohen. But they won't do it when they're actually in the committee. For some reason, the Democrats refuse to condemn the threat that is posed with the American way of life.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Pedro Rodriguez over at the Daily Signal, our correspondent over from the Capitol Hill. I know you've been covering this all day. Thanks for giving us a couple of minutes to walk us through these details. We'll have you back real soon.
Thank you, Tony. Always out there.
All right, let's talk a brief minute here about a couple of other pretty bizarre news stories of the day. And I mean, it's certainly not getting any more, it's not getting any calmer, ladies and gentlemen. And that comes over to a couple of foreign policy, kind of international pieces of news. By the way, now that we are in the bonus tonus kind of outside network broadcast portion of the show, thank you guys very much for joining us over here on the Tony Kinnett Cast. We really do appreciate your sticking around with us, no matter where you're joining us from. And we do read those comments if you do share where you're from with us. You know, not like the British who use that information to categorize and track your details, or allegedly Netflix down in Texas. That's more just because I'm really curious, and I don't know, I kind of find that stuff fascinating. Like if you're joining us from South Korea, if you're joining us from Cuba, in that case, 38715, little number station message for all of our dear patriots down in Cuba fighting against the government. But if you're joining us from South Korea, you might be a little surprised to see one of the most bizarre articles I have ever seen on the face of the internet. And guys, this internet's pretty big. According to the WSWS.org, or the World Socialist website, is where I first saw this. I tracked it down after this because I couldn't believe it. There is open panic on the left side of the aisle over South Korea reportedly moving towards joining the war against Iran. So what is this move towards joining the war? I mean, that's a pretty big news. That's a pretty big scoop for the World Socialist website. So what does Bernie Sanders reporting? What does Ben McGrath argue here? He says, an attack on a South Korean operated shipping vessel in the Strait of Hormuz last week is being seized upon by political establishment in Seoul to provide the rationale to join the US-led war against Iran. This despite the fact that no direct evidence of Iran's involvement has been presented.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
So first of all, honey, sweetie baby. By the way, I do love the kind of double standard here. So if there's ever a child in Gaza who dies, immediately it's like some mastermind plot, and we know just deep down in our soul, Israel trained a dog to send out hypersonic waves to target that child. That kind of thing. But then whenever it's a rocket fired from the Iranian coastline at a boat from South Korea, it's, well, there's no direct evidence, comrade, that Iran actually even did this. And now South Koreans are seizing. They got the Politico, Republicans pounce, Republicans see. South Koreans are seizing on the opportunity, saying, hey, we don't like people shooting at our boats. Those bastards. How could you, can you imagine a country not wanting their boats shot at by Iran? What's next? People not wanting their citizens held by foreign governments in prison? Say it ain't so. Da na meh. I mean, goodness gracious. All right, so what's the actual story? Because I had to go and look this up. I had to dive into the details. There is a section of the South Korean legislation that is calling for a more direct line of support for the United States against Iran for two reasons. Number one, so that they can gain valuable naval experience in protecting and escorting vessels against a future incursion by China. So again, live military operations around the world do tend to provide experience to a series of troops. It's actually a very fun tidbit as to why Cuba actually sent its own troops over to Angola during the bizarre civil war during the Cold War. You know, troops with experience do very well. Now, the only exception to this is the French Foreign Legion, you know. Sorry. Anyway, so as far as the South Korean situation is concerned, yes, there are members of the parliament that are calling for aiding the United States. That's not the only thing that there are those over on the left, because this article has been shared by quite a few individuals on kind of the international left, no pun intended, who have made the case that it's not just South Korea, but it's Saudi Arabia and it's the UAE, as we reported a month ago. And then it's all of these other countries like Poland and countries in Africa, like maybe Egypt, and possibly all the way down to even a little bit of South Africa, and even Australia finally, that are getting it together, several South Asian Pacific countries that might be suggesting that the United States might be right in finally getting rid of this garbage. Now, I seem to remember a lot of the left suggesting that when there's some international consensus on stuff, that means that it's moral and it's right and it's true. Except when that moves towards dismantling an Islamic grip over international lanes. So again, watching the left panic over South Korea is great, but they're also losing it over Cuba. Why are they losing it over Cuba? Because the State Department issued an offer. So what kind of beautiful Shark Tank offer was sent over to the Cubans today? According to the office of the spokesperson from the State Department, quote, the United States is ready to provide $100 million in direct assistance to the Cuban people if the Cuban regime will permit it. So wait a minute, the Cuban regime, what's normally the rule? Well, as you remember from the socialist fleet of super justice, Greta Thunberg and Hassan Piker Wonder, they were going to sail to Cuba and drop off amazing, huge amounts of food and resources and tents and equipment to throw raves and solar panels to the people of Cuba. And then as soon as those boats landed, the Cuban regime promptly took all of it. You say, Tony, how do you know that? Because there are no videos of the fleet, the flotilla, arriving at Cuba and passing out the supplies. Because if they were passing out the supplies, then we would have seen all this, wow, look at this flotilla passing things out to the Cuban people. No, they got there and then the Cuban communist regime confiscated it lickety-split. And so the State Department says, hey, look, I know that you all are accusing us of starving out Cuba. So if the Cuban government will allow us to come to Cuba, and yeah, you can supervise it, but if you allow us to just give the aid directly to Cubans, you know, kind of like what Israel did with Gaza, saying if you allow us to put the aid directly in the hands of Gaza, instead of the semi being driven into Gaza and then being captured by Hamas 15.3 seconds later, if you actually allow us to deliver the aid directly to people, then yeah, we'll deliver $100 million worth of aid. Oil, food, power. I mean, who knows? That kind of thing. It says, quote, the regime refuses to allow the U.S. to provide this assistance to Cuban people who are in desperate need of assistance due to the failures of Cuba's corrupt regime. Today, the Department of State is publicly restating, meaning it's not really a new offer. They're just saying, by the way, this is on the table. Restating the U.S. generous offer to provide an additional $100 million in direct humanitarian assistance to the Cuban people that would be distributed in coordination with the Catholic Church, and other reliable independent humanitarian organizations. Now, again, remember how the United States State Department under Rubio and the Trump administration, according to all of the really angry, bizarre, upset, like woke right goobers who say, oh, the Trump administration's kicking out Catholics. I mean, offering to coordinate with the Catholic Church to distribute aid doesn't exactly sound very anti-Catholic. Anyway, so the decision rests with the Cuban regime to accept our offer of assistance or deny critical life-saving aid and ultimately be accountable to the Cuban people for standing in the way of critical assistance. So far, what's been the response from Cuba? But that's not the whole story. There are a couple of different left-wing outlets and they're kind of agitprop pseudo-journalists who are on the websites of the world, from Blue Sky over to X, from Facebook to Reddit, who are whining that the Cuban regime may be too weak at some point to resist the State Department's offer. So because the United States reminded Cuba, hey, by the way, we could give you some help, they are worried that the will of the communists is so freaking weak that either they might accept the help or, and I kid you not, this has been suggested from over from the New Republic. One of their writers said, oh, well, the real danger here is that the Cuban people might rise up against this communist regime and take the country, and then it would desist into capitalist hell. Oh no, the horror.
Well, how the turntables.
I just appreciate these kind of stories. They're very heartwarming. I think it's funny. Now, on the Senate side, Republican Senators Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, and Rand Paul broke with Senate GOP leadership and voted alongside Democrats today on a failed bid to advance a U.S. resolution to halt military hostilities involving Iran unless Congress formally authorizes further action. Look, the American people at this point as well understand that Trump is making a bid here in this military action. And both the majority of Congress and the majority of the American people are willing to let him see it through. Now, if this is seen through and it doesn't come away with lower gas prices and actually a better situation in the region, then there will be hell to pay. But as to kind of the wager being placed, yeah, the Trump team still has the floor. Now, again, this is yet another reminder that Senators Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins, kind of that class of Republican who don't want anyone to call them mean or stinky, they are genuinely useless to the Republican caucus. And it is, in fact, John Thune, who, as many have said, could remove them from, committee assignments because they refuse to, get rid of the filibuster. He's been on camera again saying, I can't get rid of the filibuster because I don't have the votes. But he refuses to name the Republican senators who are not giving him the votes. So I'll do that for you. It's Mitch McConnell, it's Lisa Murkowski, it's Susan Collins, and then it's Tom Tillis. Probably sometimes why being John Curtis. There you go. Now, again, the answer is withhold campaign funding from Susan Collins until she complies. That's what Senate leadership is supposed to do. House and Senate leadership is supposed to be the primary dispenser for campaign funds. For Democrats, it's foreign countries, but for the Republicans, it's House leadership and Senate leadership. So, not a whole lot of movement there. Secretary of State Marco Rubio did offer probably one of the best arguments on the Trump administration's actions during his China visit right now. There's not a whole lot to show you on the Trump visit to China stuff. I mean, a bunch of people waving flags, but I mean, it's a presidential visit in China. What were you expecting? I mean, there is a little something to tell you regarding robotics, but we'll get there. Here's Secretary of State Marco Rubio on kind of the geopolitical answer here regarding China and the broader Asian co-sphere with the U.S. global power.
Do you view China as our top geopolitical foe?
Yeah, it's both our top political challenge geopolitically, and it's also the most important relationship for us to manage. I mean, it's a big, powerful country. It's going to continue to grow, but we're going to have interests of ours that are going to be in conflict with interests of theirs. And to avoid wars and maintain peace and stability in the world, we're going to have to manage those. There are clearly areas where they're so important for the United States that we're going to have to raise those issues, and we'll continue to do so. The president's going to continue to do so. There might be some areas of cooperation, too, and we want to make sure we don't walk away from those.
Fair. There are a lot of people, again, as we said yesterday, I'm not going to bore you with too much of the same. There are a lot of people who have said the Trump administration is going over to make some a horrible mistake by allowing, oh, you're going to allow us into all of this morass and this terrible problem. I'm just not seeing that, Batman. Not seeing that at all. I'm going to wait on this one. Now, there is some news out of China that I think you'll appreciate. Just a smidgen here that is worth a giggle and a half. So there's some bizarre strategy. One of the things that is very common in the world today, whenever you have a foreign leader visiting your country, you dive into a very strange need to impress foreign leadership with the coolest things that you can do. So this is, again, tale as old as time. Obviously, during the Cold War, you remember that, during that time when the Soviet leader Khrushchev came over to the country, he was impressed with American grocery stores. Remember that during the Cold War, remember that a couple of months ago, Vladimir Putin of Russia came over to the United States. And when he did so, President Trump essentially showed him a B-1 and a B-2 bomber flying right over his head. Cool displays of power. China's trying to do this too. Only China didn't actually get things out fast enough to impress the United States. So one of the things that China was very clearly trying to do is show off their robotics and tech. This is something that China wants to project onto the world stage. They want to impress everyone with all of these super duper cool robots that they can bring out there, and it's amazing and it's incredible. Wow, I mean, they're doing all of this super cool stuff. One of the projects that they were working on is with the Chinese robotics company called Unitree. So they weren't able to get this robotic display ready in time for the President of the United States visit. So what they wanted to do was show off this super cool mecha robot that is supposed to really impress you from sci-fi. Here's the clip of this. So it's the mecha dream, right? Yeah, it's going to be incredible. You're going to have all of this amazing, the guy can sit in there and he's got arms and legs. The future is here. They were going to show this off before the President of the United States. You say, how do I know this? Because there were indications from kind of the Beijing pre-social media posts of the president visiting that they were going to show off some large-scale robotics that has now been wiped clean from any agenda. And there are some Chinese IPs petitioning the archival websites to delete some of that information. So right after the President of the United States got there, the company that was expected to give the robotics presentation came forward. This is what they were supposed to impress us with. They have this, wow, super cool. They have this amazing, it's a robot. Look at it, it's so amazing, it's neat. And he can climb into the robot. Wow. Finally realizing our dreams. He climbs into the Graco car seat and a strange go-kart cage. Wow. 500 kilograms of weight. It's so incredible. Wow. By the way, for those of you whose countries have been to the moon, that's 1,100 pounds. And look, he's walking. Oh, it's so amazing. Wow, Chinese supremacy in tech. Yeah, no. No. So there have already been a few people doing a couple of analyses suggesting that there is AI footage interspersed with real footage, in that the robot looks different as you go through, as he goes through the video. Things kind of change. The gears are in slightly different places. Also, there's another argument that he wasn't even controlling the robot itself. And also, there's another post at the end that says you can actually see by the end of the video that at first, whereas the robot is upright, down at the bottom on those hinge points, those are some hydraulics. At the end of the video, they're no longer showing kind of the bottom of the robot. They also say it can be, in quadruped mode. So you can, go robot doggo for the Chinese People's Liberation Army or whatever. At the end of the video, though, they're cutting off the feet because there's a suggestion that through the course of recording the video, they damaged one of the hydraulics in the front right paw, foot, or whatever. So tale as old as time. We do this kind of a segment on the show every once in a while. Chinese robotics trying to impress the world. Now the pseudo-Europeans are also ready with their answer. Very, very exciting stuff. So from General Catalyst, who has offices in the US and Europe, they're now ready to announce the mass production of the robot dogs that General Dynamics was making a while ago. But here you go.
Hi, I'm GC.
And I'm VC.
Who's your friend here, VC?
This is Wolf AI, an AI native companion platform that combines robotics and machine learning. You'll never want a real dog after this.
Well, I think people like dogs as they already are, though, VC.
You don't need to walk it. You never need to tell the kids you sent Milo to the farm. We're leading the seed and could probably make room for you.
Well, I'd love to hear more, but we actually have a really high bar around responsibility for these things.
Okay, great, neat. No, I'm sorry. Robot pets, we've tried this one before, guys. I remember in the aughts, we had the dog that you could plug your iPhone into or your iPod into, and it's going to be so great and cool. No, your awkward Tamagotchi. No, although I really would like to see someone try to use one of these as a service dog. And like, what's it on service for? And then you just start riding it away off into the sunset. It'd be kind of funny. I've seen some of the comments suggest the New York Times has already accused Israel of using these. Oh, good times. Now, there is something, again, we're talking American dominance, though. There is some pretty cool stuff on the horizon. So Figure Robotics has been making a huge national impact over the first of its kind, a live stream in which an 8-hour shift of Figure 2 and Figure 3 human-shaped robots are doing factory style conveyor, on the industrial line here, labor. Check this out. And by the way, you say, is this real? We're going to talk about that in a second, but it's doing some of the sorting. Again, they're on the line in the factory. You say, Tony, I'm not really impressed by this. That's fair. No one's asking you to be impressed. Those robots were up, though, for 8 hours, and while slower, accomplishing quite a fair amount for a position that, up until that point, had been a human person in that instance. They've been releasing videos of these bots, making beds and things. Oh, so exciting. And again, moving slowly, opening the door for robot number 2, and that just shows them kind of cleaning up and doing some maintenance around the office. So, 2 things to draw away from this. Number 1, China can get bent. The American technology industry is freaking incredible. Number 2, this appears to be an automation system that isn't really AI. Some people are calling it AI. It's really more of an autonomy program that has a couple of different heuristical base core programs that are used to kind of argue against each other to perform tasks. That's why things are a little slower. And there is internet connectivity. Unlike some of the other robots that we've shown so far in previous segments months ago, these robots are not controlled by a dude in India on a controller, which is what some of the other robotics companies have been accused of. So we are moving towards actually getting some type of moderate labor robotic use. And it's only going to expand. Why do I bring this up? What's the second thing to talk about on this particular matter? The argument that we really need to import massive numbers of illegal immigrants into this country and then give them amnesty and citizenship or permanent work visas that are totally never just going to end up leading to citizenship anyway, because they're the only ones willing to pick the crops. They're the only ones willing to make hotel beds. They're the only ones willing to do the on the line jobs right there. Guys, boys, girls, squirrels, ladies, gentlemen, gentle thems, I guess, if you're that weird non-binary kind of thing. Guys, this shows that we don't need that. And we might even be to this point a lot sooner. And why is that? Because when you import massive amounts of individuals to do cheap, next to slave labor, if we look at, for example, the California weed farm, if we look at, again, some of the fraud happening over at the Goya plant in Nebraska and Omaha, you don't even get real American labor and wages there. Now, the consequence, the other side of this is, well, we need to stop and replace this because, humans are going to be losing their jobs and there's going to be mass unemployment. No. And here's why, by the way. What do you need large numbers of if you have some kind of a workforce like this? You need the electricians, you need the plumbers, you need the tradesmen who keep this kind of infrastructure running. And so there are going to become new jobs for individuals who are managing these particular style of robotics. The benefit to the American economy is we don't need to rely on cheap immigrant imported slave labor. We also don't need to rely on China's slave labor and mass importing cheap Chinese goods. If the robots can make them here and there's no human labor cost, then the goods are cheaper. And you say, well, that means there's no American jobs for it. There are. If the factory is here, it requires Americans to maintain, to build, to keep it running, etc. And if the job wasn't here in the first place, the idea is not to make a very expensive shirt here in the country, and the only alternative being slave labor in China. American growth needs something to pioneer. I've said this before on the show so many times. If there was nothing to pioneer, if there was nothing for Americans to go and do and build, if the idea is to turn into Europeans who just sit in their home for centuries and do nothing, and they don't grow, they don't expand, they don't create, they just sit there and go, my dad lived here, I lived here, my kids are going to live here, I will do nothing but exist. That sucks. Americans are pioneers. Either pioneer or get out of the way. The idea on the establishment Republican side that free markets means importing a bunch of cheap slave labor, that sucks. The left-wing populist idea that we need to rely on China and also import lots of cheap immigrant labor, that sucks. And also the populist side, the Luddite argument that we need to artificially prop up the economy and ban technology because Americans will all be out of work. That's never been done once, and it's a dumb idea. They don't work. So I'd rather do the thing that works and instead make it easier for Americans here to be trained to do the maintenance for this kind of crap. And to be, again, plumbers and electricians and HVAC technicians and all of the numerous other kinds of tradesmen that are going to be needed for the biggest manufacturing boom in history. That's where it's headed. That's absolutely where it's headed. And that's a good thing. That's absolutely a very, very good thing. So that aside, we're going to head over to just a smidgen of some of the most bizarre strategies. Also, I've been waiting to share some of this with you today. Some really, really great stuff tonight. Don't go anywhere. A ton more to discuss. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on The Daily Signal.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
All right, before we get to some of the pretty silly events from the left and their strategy to win things, it is May, and that means two things. Number one, it is Indy race season here in my home state of Indiana, but for the rest of the country, it's National Foster Care Month. So that means taking a moment to tell you about our friends over at the Alliance Defending Freedom and what they're doing to support foster and adoptive families here in the United States of America. Over 300 children are in foster care in the United States right now, and states desperately need parents to step up and meet that need. But in some states, government officials are turning away Christian foster parents because of their biblical beliefs on sex and gender. The Alliance Defending Freedom is standing with these parents against this discrimination, and thankfully they've helped overturn some of these ridiculous state policies. Some states still discriminate against Christian foster parents, and ADF is standing with a family right now in Washington whose foster care renewal was restricted because of their faith. Your gift helps parents stand up for their rights in cases just like these all over the country. Text TONY, T-O-N-Y, to 83848 or visit joinadf.com/Tony to give in support of Christian foster parents today. Huge thank you to ADF for sponsoring the show. And by the way, when I tell you that there are those states who just do not give a rip about the children in their system, I bring you Xavier Becerra, who's running for California's governor. He's Gavin Newsom 2.0, former Health and Human Services Secretary, and he's getting raked over the coals by CBS and California media because not only was he a horrible Health and Human Services Secretary, but he's just done a really, really bad job at convincing people that he cares at all whatsoever about actually solving core issues for Californians in the United States. Here you go.
Speaking of some of those children, it has been alleged by the Trump Justice Department that under your watch, some of those children were lost track of and ultimately trafficked, and that they have tried to find and rescue them. How do you respond to that?
Well, those are the MAGA talking points that have been used over the years. But let me ask you, Donald Trump is back in office. What has he done to find these so-called kids that they claim are lost? Have you heard that the Trump machine is out there trying to find these so-called lost kids? It's just Trump talking points.
Oh, just talk. Yeah, sure. There are all of these children again who are lost. We have the documented records specifically. We have all of the data regarding it. Oh, I'm sure it's just a clerical error. It's the Ilhan Omar answer. Oh, well, I'm sure it's just, an accounting error that my wealth isn't $30 million. It's 18,000. You remember counting as a child? 1, 2, 3, 18,000, 30 million. It's that kind of logic.
Not true then.
No, we did. When we had kids in our care, we had them in our care. And we did not let kids work. You heard about exploitation of some of these kids. That was exploitation done by employers. The kids that were in our care at HHS did not leave our facilities. And so
except the ones that are on the record having left.
Republicans were talking about, these MAGA talking points, are things that were outside of the jurisdiction of the Department of Health and Human Services.
No. Health and Human Services is absolutely allowed to levy charges or even send in a raid to businesses that they suspect of exploiting minors. That's under the purview of Health and Human Services. How do you know? I've read those cases in which they have asked the FBI to raid facilities suspected of child exploitation. In fact, it's one of the very first actions ever taken by a Health and Human Services secretary here in the United States. So bizarre, stupid, not really a good lie per se, but it didn't exactly get any worse, because then there was an interview done with KTLA Channel 5 in Los Angeles in which he just loses it with the reporter, because the reporter has the gall, I guess, to ask him questions. Interesting.
During your time as HHS secretary, a New York Times investigation found the health department couldn't find some 85,000 children it had released.
That's not accurate. What you just read is not accurate. First, that's what I'll say, because it was never the case that we could not find kids. You're essentially, I don't know if you got those talking points from Donald Trump.
It's from a New York Times article.
That's not what the New York Times article said.
Yeah, it is, though. And you actually see KTLA 5 on screen pull up the exact quote from the New York Times specifically. You guys, boys and girls, children, you cannot play this game that you played during the COVID administration, during the Biden years, where there was all of this big, massive cover up and, oh, there's no media anywhere. Things have split apart, okay? There is a huge change in different news outlets, which no longer see it as a profitable way of carrying out the news, as obscuring and obfuscating a lot of things. How do I know that? There are a lot of TV news stations that were known for this kind of crap that have been shut down, that have closed because no one's watching them. They have no money. The USA Today, the Kinnett newspaper network, has lost tons of money because their papers that tried this crap couldn't get away with it. So KTLA 5 here is roasting him over the coals because while he's saying, oh, it's not there, they're just showing it on screen. Yeah, the dude's a big fat liar.
Talking points from Donald Trump.
It's from a New York Times article.
That's not what the New York Times article said. The New York Times said that individuals, the children and their sponsors, did not respond to calls. They didn't say we couldn't find kids.
Working overnight in slaughterhouses, replacing roofs, operating machineries in factories, children.
This is the guy who is the front runner for governor in California on the Democrat side of the aisle. He's the front runner, other than Steve Hilton. This is the guy that's currently up.
As young as 14 years old.
That part occurred after these children had left the care of Department of Health and Human Services.
To let these children go into those individual sponsors in their responsibility.
So again, that's the criticism, that the Department of Health and Human Services had these kids, these migrant children, and then they just let them go to whoever. Like someone would come and go, yeah, I'll take, give me 2 kids and a bagel. And they'll be like, sure, are we going to ask them where they're going to take the kids, what they're going to do with the children, what kind of industry they're in, what's the scoop? No, just like, hey, those 2 kids over there don't look like they're doing anything. All right, here's your 2 kids, sir. Have a pleasant day. And so it's like, well, it wasn't our fault. After they were out our door, hey, not my problem. Maybe there's children working in slaughterhouses over the night, but hey, I mean, what's a little orphan meat?
These kids, probably because they needed to earn some money, started working in places.
Oh, just random kids out there, getting out there, and maybe they need to earn some money. This class of Democrats, and by the way, you also see this over on the right, on the far, I should say the far, not really on the right anymore, but these kind of goofy arguments where these really wealthy coastal elitists believe that this country is still 1956, where a kid would just go get a paper route to earn some money after school. That's what kids are doing these days, right? They're like, I need a little extra cash from milkshakes and comic books down at the drugstore. No, sweetie pie, honey baby. They went to work at the slaughterhouse. You guys know that slaughterhouses don't have signs out there that have like Chuck E. Cheese holding a roast going, hey kids, come work at the slaughterhouse. That's not, no.
That were very exploitive.
Yeah, very exploitive. No freaking kidding. Yes, thank you. That's a real special moment. So bold strategy, saying I didn't do it. You know, it never happened. It never happened at all. This is the Democrat strategy heading into this year. I'm not joking. This is their plan. And you can see this in a couple of ways. One of these examples comes from former Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas. Guys, this is truly one of the most bizarre things I've seen. He's on stage saying at a Politico rally, actually, we wanted far more border enforcement. I Alejandro Mayorkas, I wanted to shut the border, but they wouldn't let me. Here you go.
Did you feel that you had the support from the president in order to succeed?
There were areas of disagreement within immigration policy and in other areas, but I voiced my views. I was very pleased that in June of 2024 we took executive action that I thought made reforms that were sensible.
That's not what you were asked. Oh, we had disagreements, but by the time we got to the very end of the term, June of 2024, okay.
If those
and that proved successful.
If those executive actions had been taken 1 or 2 years earlier, do you think Donald Trump would be the president today?
I am not in a position to speculate, but I will tell you that I would be far more better rested and less punched.
So that's new. Oh, we've always been, pro enforcing the border. Oh, you just must have imagined in November of 2021 in front of the Senate when Alejandro Mayorkas said exactly this.
Do you believe the Biden immigration policies are successful?
Senator, I think rebuilding a broken immigration system and rebuilding a dismantled one takes time, and we're on the road to success.
So you think we're on the right track as a nation?
I do.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Wait a minute. So originally it was, we had some disagreements and clearly there were problems and I wouldn't have done it that way. But then you go back to November of 21 and, clearly we're on the road to success. Things are fine. It's wonderful. It's sunny. It's rosy.
How would you grade yourself?
Senator, I'm a tough grader on myself and I give myself an A for effort.
This is the gayest thing.
Investment in mission.
I'm a very tough grader on myself, so I'd have to give myself an A for absolutely freaking worthless. I'm probably excellent in amazeballs and incredible. I love it. It good luck with it.
In support of our workforce.
Okay. Do you think you're doing a better job than the Trump administration?
Senator, I believe in the policies that we are putting forward, and I condemn a number of the policies that were promulgated in the prior administration.
So you think?
Oh, very special. Exciting. Good stuff. Now, I would love to point this out. This is why the polls aren't increasing for the Democrats. They aren't. There has been one poll for the Democrats that's increased, and that's the 18 to 29s. There was an Atlas Intel poll that suggested that the youths are 85% in favor of the Democrats right now. Every other single poll in the book does not show substantial growth for the Democrats. And there's a reason why. However mad individuals want to say they are at the Trump administration, the Democrats have proposed nothing at all. And for the 18 to 29s, which vote pivots wildly every couple of months, they're less than 11% of the actual electorate. That's a lot you're really throwing out there on quite a serious gamble. But again, all things said and aside, there are individuals that will be told this specifically. You have no plan. There's no suggestions. The polls do not show tons of support for Democrat action. We don't actually see anything of that substance. And they won't. They'll just repeat the same line over and over and over again because they don't have anything. The tank is empty. How empty is the tank? well, we're going to go back to immigration and claim that while Alejandro Mayorkas totally would have done something different, that the Trump administration is actually super duper stinky and bad for deporting people who are illegal immigrants. So the Washington Post has released a big whining article saying the Trump administration's deportation campaign has removed an unusually high number of men who had lived and worked in the U.S. for years, upending the livelihoods and routines of scores of families. So, two things here. Number one, remember just a few weeks ago when all of the left-wing outlets were suggesting that actually the Obama administration had done like a ton of more deportations than the Trump administration. And we told you, and yet again, here, get the jar, correct yet again, that the numbers that were counted for the Biden and Obama administrations who deported a ton of people, they were counting people who were brought into the United States for like 3 minutes and then sent away. Whereas the Trump administration doesn't count those because they are simply turned away at the border. But as far as people who have been in the United States for a while and are here illegally, yes, the Trump administration has made an effort to deport far more individuals here in the United States. So for the Trump administration, the median number of days that individuals are in the United States and then deported are those who have been here longer, between 800 and 1,000 days. Almost a quarter of the 300,000 men removed since January of 25 had lived in the U.S. for at least 3 years. And their argument is not, well, they broke the law, but I mean, well, their argument is not that they came here legally. Their argument is not that they didn't break the law, things just happen. No, they admit these guys broke the law. Trump is just really mean for enforcing it. Look how sad they are, is the whole argument. They're being separated from their families. That's the argument that's being made. Which again, the Tom Homan solution was just deport them together then. Just send them, keep the family together. So you don't want them to be deported by themselves. You don't want them to be deported together. The only argument they will accept is they must be here forever, always, and forever. I mean, it's the same immigration argument. No lessons have been learned. No changes have been made. And the same on the race card. So from the NAACP down in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, this is a wild post. Quote, "It is seriously disturbing for white folks to be lobbying to be the interim mayor in Charlotte. Our mayor, who recently resigned, is a black woman who is a registered Democrat." So the problem is that white people shouldn't be allowed to run for mayor because the last person was black? What? What if black people want a white person to be the mayor? The racial stereotype arguments that we are only hiring people because they're black and because they're a woman, the argument made about Ketanji Brown Jackson, again, which Joe Biden said that's why he nominated her to the Supreme Court. When you have people come out, the quote unquote moderates in the media who say, oh no, Democrats aren't, Ketanji was so qualified, to have cases like this where they say white people shouldn't be running for things. We elect people based on race and sex around here. Yeah, I don't know about that one, Phil. In Charlotte, black voters have been intentional about having black representation. White folks are either tone deaf or worse, self-centered. It's not about you. Being the mayor is about being the mayor of everybody there, sweetheart, honey cake, sweetie baby. It's not about being a certain color. That's kind of what the whole civil rights movement was about. Otherwise, why don't we have a white mayor and a black mayor? If it's so important for you to have representation, then we'll have a white mayor and a black mayor. And we'll have a white legislature and a black legislature, and a white district and a black district, and a white watering fountain and a black water. Oh. This isn't making the argument that you think it is making. Now, there are a couple of lawsuits they are throwing out there here at the end. A new federal lawsuit accuses Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins of proselytizing federal employees. That's right. She's witnessing to people. Why? What's she doing? By frequently invoking Jesus Christ in work emails. Oh my gosh, the horror. Like, my love in Jesus, Brooke Rollins. And they're calling that like against the law and proselytizing? That's your move. This is it. This is the strategy for 26. Make America California. Don't mention Jesus in emails. Open the borders. And then only black people are allowed to run for office. I mean, best of luck to you, sweetheart. Best of luck. Again, Republicans aren't perfect. There are things that Republicans absolutely need to change. But if you are going to make the argument here in front of God and everybody, the only choice for Democrats to make is to either burn down the country with insane socialist policies or the same mealy-mouthed, pay-for-everything racial policy that is also socialist, because, again, that's no longer a buzzword that it's a poison pill, it's a virtue. That's what you're offering is the counter to Trump? Also, everyone who doesn't agree with me is racist and evil and needs to be violently removed. Okay. All right. Best, again, I mean, you feel free to run with that. If it's the choice is Kamala Harris and AOC, okie dokie then. I think we'll finish things off there this evening. You guys have a wonderful evening. We'll do some of the mail time stuff tomorrow. Nice little Thursday treat. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Y'all, take care.